jump in. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Football Elevated Podcast. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined once again by my fellow host, Mack Bryant. How you doing today, Mack?
All is well. All is well.
All right. We are officially wrapping up our all-time team series today with the NFC East. We've made our journey from the West Coast all the way to the Atlantic Seaboard with the NFC East teams. And we will be doing the following order. We're going Giants, Eagles, Commanders, and Cowboys. So if you're not familiar with the format, we go team by team, and Mack, or myself, introduces the picks for the all-time teams by position groups, and then we compare and see if we had any differences, and there's usually quite a bit of difference, so some fun debate along the way. This is completely subjective, so you may not agree with our choices, but that always makes for better content, I think. So
yes.
Without any further ado, we will get started with the New York Football Giants, and Mack will go first. We'll go offense, defense, and so on. So over to you for, once again, the New York Football Giants.
The New York Football Giants. Well, I like this division in general. There's so much history. The newest team in this division is from 1961, I believe it is. So you've got teams that are going all the way back to the 20s and 30s, franchises. Actually, all three except the Cowboys go back to either the 20s or the 30s. And there's a lot of history here, and still, surprisingly, there's some places where the history has not been strong, even though the teams, even though the teams are as fundamental to the league as they've been. And the Giants is no exception. I mean, they go back to 1925, so they're not one of the original franchises, but close to it. And yet the best quarterback they've ever had played recently, in my opinion, and that's Eli Manning. Yeah. And Eli Manning is he a hot point for debate.
It's a spicy topic.
Yeah, I mean, he really sits at the center of our understanding of what a good quarterback is, right? It is it wins, or is it stats? Is it counting stats, or is it how the player fared against his peers? You know, no matter, he's almost a Rorschach test. You know, like, no matter what you believe about the NFL will come out some way in the Eli Manning discussion. Yeah. But I think what's clear is that he's the best Giants quarterback that's ever been. And there's been a few, right? There's, Y.A. Tittle was great for a short time with them. Was an MVP with them. Fred Harkington played for 5 years with them, also a Hall of Famer. But in terms of a guy who played his entire career there and did a lot of good things, including 2 championships, he's the only Giants quarterback to have multiple championships with the franchise. Eli Manning is the guy. Now, if we had a debate about a lot of other things to do with Eli Manning, that's much more of a debate. But I don't think it's a debate here as to who the franchise's best quarterback has been.
Yeah, I think in terms of peak, you maybe give it to Tittle because of the MVP, but it was very short lived. It was the end of his career. I tried maybe Phil Simms, but it just doesn't have he has a Super Bowl ring, but in terms of the career accolades and the longevity, Eli's got it. But he's one of those guys where you accept any outcome with him. He could go on Monday Night Football, throw 4 interceptions against the Eagles, at MetLife Stadium, and you're like, yeah, that's Eli. And then the next week he could go to Dallas, Cowboy Stadium, throw 5 touchdowns and beat, the 12-4 Cowboys or the 17-0 Patriots.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're just like, oh, that's Eli. He just kind of does what he does.
And doesn't seem fazed by either outcome.
Exactly, and that's
famously neutral body language.
Exactly, I think maybe that's the secret to his success is he doesn't ride the highs and he doesn't wallow in the lows. So yeah, I agree with you 100% on this pick. I tried, maybe just for the sake of being different, but Eli it is.
Yeah, Eli, no doubt. For the pass catchers, the ball handlers, I have 2 running backs and I have 3 pass catchers. Okay. My running backs, I started with Frank Gifford. Frank Gifford was not only the best player on the Giants for a while, he was the face of the franchise. He was the face of the league for the middle to late 1950s. He was, what a lot of people might not know is that he was a halfback and he was a great one, but he also played defense. So, and he was.
I think a lot of these guys did. As we go through the list. Well,
and a lot of them did. But I guess. Maybe what sets him and some others apart is he played defense when he didn't have to, right? If you played prior to the 1940s, you had to play defense. That was required. It was in the rules. He was good enough to be a defensive player and an offensive player at the same time in this league. So he gets credit for that. And then my other running back is Tiki Barber, who had a very slow start with the Giants, lots of fumbles in and out of the doghouse.
That's what he was known for,
Yeah, he was known for fumbling, and he had a stellar end to his career, and I believe left the team right before they won their first title.
So the great irony, he was there for 10 years, and he missed the Super Bowl win.
Yeah, he missed that. But he's certainly one of the best players in Giants history. And then for the receivers, I've got their all-time receiving leader, Amani Toomer, as one of my receivers. I've got Del Schaffner as another. And when you look at him, he's a 3-time first-team All-Pro for the Giants. He's a 5-time first-team All-Pro in the league. He did 2 others with the Rams. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Like, how is that? It's stunning to me that, obviously he was a great Giant. He was with the Rams before he's with the Giants. Also great there. Not in the Hall of Fame, but one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best Giants wide receivers. And then I've got Mark Bavaro as a tight end. And he, maybe the numbers aren't the biggest. It was just something that maybe you had to live through it. He was the toughness of that offense.
That's
right?
what it was.
He obviously he was at his peak. He was a great tight end, 2-time first-team All-Pro, but his kind of bludgeon you attitude pervaded through the offense, and I think pervaded. Obviously their defense has been great, but pervaded through the entire team as well. So I've got Amani Toomer, Del Schaffner as my wide receivers, Mark Bavaro as the tight end, and running backs Frank Gifford, Tiki Barber.
Okay, so we've got a slight difference, not too much. So RB1 is Frank Gifford. He's probably the best player on this offense, period. Maybe the best player on this team, period. I think we talked last week when I brought up Joe Namath, you said Frank Gifford was actually the first real superstar that made that media.
The Madison Avenue guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Makes sense. He plays for the Giants.
Yeah.
And then I went with Tiki Barber. So interesting fact about Tiki Barber, he is only one of 3 running backs all time to have 10,000 career rushing yards and 5,000 receiving yards.
Yeah.
It's him, Marcus Allen, and Marshall Faulk. So I did not expect that when I looked up. I was like, that's a lot of receiving yards for a running back. And like you said,
he's not. When people talk about dual threat backs, they don't talk about Tiki.
No,
but Tiki's got some excellent all-time or career numbers.
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of the prickly nature of the guy. He hasn't had the most stellar post retirement vibes around him.
And that's interesting because for someone who's on TV a lot, for someone who's in the public eye a lot, he's not. Typically, that helps you. And in terms of your quiet campaigning for Hall of Fame, typically that helps you. It's not helping Tiki at all. I don't know.
No, he's kind of had this shock jock vibe going on with him. I feel like every time I see his name, it's for him saying something controversial.
Right.
Having some kind of hot take, because I think he is on the radio every day in New York, so maybe that's just part of the job. Right. But he has not helped himself. I don't think he's super beloved among Giants fans. I didn't get that vibe.
Yeah. And just for the reasons we talked about, right? He was in the window where he missed all the best of the best feelings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't part of those championship teams.
Yeah. So I had also Amani Toomer as my pass catcher, Mark Bavaro, who was kind of Gronk before Gronk, like the super physical tight end. There's that famous clip of him carrying, I think it's 4 or 5 Eagles defenders for 15 yards. It wasn't even a touchdown, but it was just a routine catch over the middle of the field where he drags 10 guys. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did run over Ronnie Lott at one point. That was a big highlight.
It's interesting. They both have famous clips of trucking each other. Right. Yeah. So there's a Bavaro clip out there trucking Lott and vice versa.
Yeah. And then my last pass catcher, I went with someone more recent. I went with Odell Beckham Jr., who, when he started, he came out the gate, absolute gangbusters, 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards. He has that famous one-handed catch that we see a million times a year on Sunday. It doesn't hurt that it was against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. But just possibly
the best catch that where the stakes were low. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were making a list of best catches all time,
Mm-hmm.
most of the catches you'd put on there would be playoff catches, Super Bowl catches, and then that one.
Yeah. Right. Santonio Holmes, David Tyree.
Right. The
all Super Bowl
helmet
catches.
catch. Yeah.
And then but in terms of accolades, I mean, he was a 3-time Pro Bowler, second team, a 2-time All-Pro, Rookie of the Year. And then the injuries and the trade to Cleveland just derailed his career. He ended up getting a Super Bowl ring with the Rams, so credit to him. And he's still around. He's on the roster bubble with the Giants.
He's on the Giants roster right now. Yes.
Yeah, for now. We'll see how it goes. But I'm rooting for him. He seems like a good guy. But yeah, so a slight difference there with our skill guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I considered Odell. I had him on my honorable mention, so he was the first one out for me. Okay. Right. So yeah, I get you there. Offensive line. Now, this is an interesting group because, in my opinion, you've got two of the best offensive linemen to have ever played, and then you've got three others that are like, boy, there's a lot of franchises that these guys would not be on this team. There may be 20 of the 32 they would not be on this team. So I'll start with the best. Mel Hein is my center. Mel Hein is perhaps. I know you were talking about Gifford. He's definitely in the top handful of Giants ever. People don't know him because he played in the 1930s, but he was a league MVP in the 1930s.
I saw that. I was like, what?
At center. And the reason that's possible, help the people with this. So the prevailing offense back in the 1930s was the single wing. So it's essentially a shotgun offense. You were snapping to someone who's essentially a running back. You're not really throwing the ball. You're running it. The way you fool people in the single wing is you start in motion. So what Mel Hein's job was as a center was to make a shotgun snap to a running back who might be in motion to the left or to the right, and then get a block. So you could imagine how important that is to an entire offense to be able to hit a moving target from the backfield and then block somebody after that. And then, of course, he was playing defense as well. So he was a linebacker on defense. So all of that put together made an MVP player for someone who played offensive line, which had never happened before and will obviously never happen again. So that's how great he was. And then you got Rosie Brown, who I believe is the first pure offensive lineman to be a Hall of Famer. So you've got this era of football where you've got guys playing both sides. So yeah, you've got lots of offensive linemen playing in the Hall of Fame, but they also played defensive end. They also played someplace else. Rosie Brown was the first exclusively a player who's played exclusively offensive line who was inducted in the Hall of Fame, and he was amazing. I believe 8-time first team All Pros, something like that. I mean, it was high multiples of first team All Pros. Has an argument to be a Mount Rushmore offensive tackle. That's how good he was. So he's there, and then and then you're trying to figure it out, right? At guard, I have Chris Snee and I have Jack Stroud. Jack Stroud was on their 1956 championship team. He's a 3-time All-Pro. Chris Snee was, I believe, a 3-time Pro Bowler more recently. And then I've got Jumbo Elliott at tackle, who was on one of the championship. I don't think he was on both of the championship teams. I think he was on the 1990 championship team.
Yes. Yeah.
So center, Mel Hein. Tackle, Rosie Brown, the other tackle, Jumbo Elliott, and then Chris Snee and Jack Stroud are my 5.
Okay. Yeah, we've got 4 of the same 5. So tackles, Roosevelt Brown or Rosie Brown, Jumbo Elliott. Two great names. By the way,
right?
They just Roosevelt just sounds like an offensive tackle.
Yes.
And then for my guards, Chris Snee, and then I went with Ron Stone, who is a little more recent, 2-time Pro Bowler, 2-time second team All Pro. And then Mel Hein, of course, the one of the slam dunk picks on the offensive line, but kind of slim pickings, I think, in general, right? For this offense, I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Given again, this is a 100-year-old team, so you expected there was very few people that jumped out. I mean, like, obviously, pass catchers, there's not people that are jumping out there. You're not.
Yeah.
These aren't all-timers. They're all-time Giants, but they're not all-time NFL players anywhere in the pass catching room. And obviously, Gifford, for his era, was one of the best players in that era. But even Tiki, he was a great Giant,
Yeah,
but he
but
wasn't
not an all-timer.
Yeah, not an
Yeah, I think
all-timer.
it's not like they're the Cardinals, right, that have not had any success. I think maybe they haven't had like a period of sustained success. I don't think there was ever a dynasty in New York. There's something about this team. When I lived in New Jersey for a while, and I had a little affinity more for the Jets, I think. And there's just something about this team that kind of gives me the ick. I know that's a kind of a Gen Z thing to say. I don't know what it is.
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because if you've lived up there, then you know that the fandom goes in groupings, right? So the Giants belong with the Yankees. And
generally,
generally. And then you've got the Jets and the Mets. So you've got the Giants and the Yankees, who are like the more favored of the teams. And then the Jets and the Mets that are less so. Yeah. I mean, the Giants obviously they had that great period of success in the 80s, the mid 80s to early 90s. But what they also were I don't even know if you could call them a bad luck team, but they played for the NFL championship team, or the NFL championship in the 50s 6 times and won once.
Yeah.
So they were always around, right? They had a lot of good teams and a lot of good players in that era. But I guess not many of them handled the ball or were pass catchers.
Yeah. Which is, I think, I would say the bulk of the elite players are on the defense.
Yeah.
Which I think, so over to you again for the defensive line.
So for defensive line, I'm going 4-3, conventional 4-3. My edges are Michael Strahan, who's one of the greatest Giants of all time, and obviously someone recent people know, and Andy Robustelli, who was a great defensive end in the 1950s and 60s. And he's someone, I hate this gap in the stats that we have with sacks.
Yeah.
Because we only measure sacks from 1960 forward. He played the bulk of his career prior to then. And in the years that we can measure, he had great sack numbers at the end of his career. So with a guy like him, Gino Marchetti is another one where I'm like, man, I wonder how many sacks these guys really had. But he was a great player in those 50s teams. And then on the interior, I've got Arnie Weinmeister and Rosie Greer, who were also multiple All-Pros, each of them. So Greer and Weinmeister inside, outside, Strahan, and Robustelli.
Yeah.
And then I'm going front 7.
I'll say I had the same exact 4 for the defensive line, and then I had a question about why do we have that gap? Is it just a lack of play-by-play, like box scores? Is it lack of footage?
I don't know well, I mean, I think if I understand correctly, the way it's been done is someone's, or maybe a group of someone's, have looked at every film. Yeah. Right. So you can see thankfully sacks are one of the things that you can readily see if you've got a game film,
very
right?
easily. Yeah.
But I don't think that you have every game film. I mean, you're talking about the era where not every game was televised. So I think that's probably the barrier, that there was really only consistent televising of the games after that period. And that's typically what it is. Same with tackles. Tackles, many fans might not know, tackles still aren't an official stat.
Oh, I did not know that.
I mean, they're tracked. They're consistently tracked now, but they're not an official stat because they're not audited by the league anyway. It's up to the home, I think the home team scorekeeper, as to how they're tracked. So because of that, they're not an official stat, and they weren't consistently even tracked before 1994. So you have to be careful as a fan. We've got to be careful saying, "Oh, he's the all-time leader in tackles." Well, since 1994,
as far as we know,
yeah. So I think that's probably the barrier in not having that data, because not every game was on TV or televised.
Yeah, makes sense
in that era.
Sense.
Yeah.
All right.
So my linebackers. Well, let me say the most obvious one for last. So we've got Harry Carson, who was obviously he's a Hall of Fame linebacker in that great Giants resurgent period in the 80s and 90s. You've got Sam Huff, who we don't talk about enough. Sam Huff he wasn't the first middle linebacker, but Tom Landry was the defensive coordinator for the Giants in the 50s. and he was the pioneer of the 4-3 defense. And the first 4-3 linebacker chosen specifically to run that defense was Sam Huff. So he is a very important person in the history of the league for that, for the way that he played it, the way that it was designed around his skills. And then it became the standard defense for 20 to 30 years, right? That's what it went from. No one's running that. People are running a 5-2. People are running a different set to everyone in the league is running a 4-3. Yeah, so that's transition
called the base defense for a reason, right?
Yes, base defense, right? And going back even further in history, the 4-3 was designed to stop I'll call it the modern T formation. So the Bears started that in 1940 and dominated the league from basically the entire decade of the 40s with a defense that no one could stop because of the substitution rules. You needed different types of players on defense than you had on offense to be able to stop that defense or to stop that offense, right? So you had these big lumbering guys on defense who had to guard in space and they couldn't, and they got destroyed by this defense. So the NFL changed the rules in 1946, allowing for free substitution, and then that set the stage for the 4-3 to become a thing, and Sam Huff was the first great linebacker to play in the 4-3. So
there you go.
Very, very important. And then, of course, you got Lawrence Taylor, who is, I think he's one of, I'll say two things. One, I believe he's the best player of all time. He's the single best player of all time. That's my stand on that.
Not best defensive player, just best player.
Single best player of all time.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, I believe he's one of four players who even have an argument. So I think there are four guys who have an argument to be the best player of all time: Lawrence Taylor, Jim Brown, Jerry Rice, and Tom Brady. Those are the four. Okay. Nobody else, in my opinion, has an argument. And then I choose LT because of those three players. And if you want to, the way I frame it in my mind, Jerry Rice is the most productive player of all time.
Yeah,
his numbers
hands
are
down.
Right. His numbers are out of sight. The number two is nowhere near number one with that. Tom Brady is the most accomplished player of all time in terms of, well, obviously he's got some Jerry Rice in him with the numbers, but someone's going to pass his numbers. All right. He's not out of reach. Yeah. He will get caught numbers wise, but in terms of the championships, that's going to be a harder deal. You've got Jim Brown is the most dominant player of all time from start to finish. No player dominated his position more than Jim Brown did, right? He was an MVP. Yeah, right? 9 years. He was an MVP in his rookie year. He was an MVP in his last year. He's an MVP in the middle. He played 9 seasons. He led the league in rushing 8 times. He never missed a game. He never laid out on the field, right? There's no chink in his armor. Mm-hmm. He is the most dominant player. And then LT is the most transcendent player, meaning the way that he played changed the way everybody else had to play.
Yes.
And that's why I call
him, right?
Right. That's exactly the movie The Blind Side. But because
that's how it starts. If you remember the movie, that's how it starts.
And I read I read the book too.
I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
but because of Lawrence Taylor, not only did every team in the league need a Lawrence Taylor to rush, you needed a different type of athlete to play defense or offensive tackle, right? Your blindside tackle. And you ultimately needed another type of athlete to play quarterback.
Yes.
The Tom Brady style of football is obsolete now because of Lawrence Taylor and his descendants. You cannot be Tom Brady anymore because of Lawrence Taylor. So Lawrence Taylor was an 8-time first-team All-Pro and only one linebacker in the history of the game, and none after the merger have 8 first-team All-Pros. It's only Lawrence Taylor. If you go back further in that, it's not, Ray Lewis doesn't have that many, Jack Lambert doesn't have that many, Dick Butkus doesn't have that many. Nobody has that many except for Lawrence Taylor and then Joe Schmidt, linebacker for the Lions in the 50s and 60s. But so you've got that, just his own position. Then he was the last player to win the MVP. The last non-quarterback running back to win the MVP. You've got that. But then you've got the fact that he changed how the edge is played. He changed how offensive tackle is played. He's changed how quarterback is played. So he's the best player in his own position, and he's the only player that changed the way that everybody else has to play to the degree that he has. So when you put those two things together, to me, that's the GOAT. And the reason why we don't talk about that more is because it's so much easier and better to market Tom Brady as the GOAT.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Or Jerry Rice.
Or Jerry Rice or almost anybody else than Lawrence Taylor because of who he was off the field.
Exactly. That's one thing I was going to say is that definitely hurts the GOAT case, at least in terms of the way it's talked about off the field because of all the indiscretions, like we could say is a light word to say. So I think there's several players throughout NFL history that revolutionized their position. Right, we could say Michael Vick or some of these other, athletic quarterbacks, or maybe Jerry Rice with the route running, or I think we talked about was it Mike Ditka and the way that he played the tight end. But seems like there's only one guy that revolutionized the game.
Yes.
And it seems like that's LT on both sides of the ball, obviously because of the impact, because of, like all the things you said about the way the offensive tackles have to be played and maybe the sets and the splits and even their footwork and the athlete. Yeah. And of course, them getting $100 million contracts or whatever it is directly tied to him and the way that he completely destroyed teams. Like, I didn't live through that, through the Lawrence Taylor experience, but just going back and watching the clips and it's not like we didn't have dominant defensive linemen before or dominant linebackers, but I think he was the first guy that combined both of those things with the incredible pass rush, the tackling in space, and just the freak athlete nature. And it's just crazy to think of what he could have been without all the off the field issues, right?
Exactly.
And there's so many guys like that whose potential was stunted, and it seems like he thrived despite all of that stuff.
Yeah, so I think that he's got a very strong case, and in my opinion, the strongest case to be the greatest player of all time. Right. Most people don't view him
strong
that way.
Statement. I love it.
Most people don't view it that way, but that's the way I view him, what he did on the field and how he impacted the game. Right. So that's my front seven. So linebackers, LT, Sam Huff,
6 Hall of Famers. Carson. Right?
Yeah.
6 out of 7 Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
Jeez.
and then, Strahan, Robustelli, Rosie Greer is the only one who was not. Actually, I'm not sure Weinmeister is either. So, is he?
When I looked it up, he was.
Okay, but, so if he is, then you're right. Rosie Greer is the only one who's not.
Yeah. All right. And then your defensive backs.
Defensive backs, we've got another history maker here, but at corners, I've got Eric Barnes, who only played 4 seasons for the team, 4 Pro Bowls, 2 All-Pros. The other corner is Mark Haynes, also a short time with the Giants, but an All-Pro 4 times with them. And then my safeties, I've got Jimmy Patton, who's a 5-time first-team All-Pro. Again, not a 5-time first-team All-Pro, not in the Hall of Fame. At safety, and then Emlyn Tennell. Emlyn Tennell is the first black player of the Giants in Giants history, and he's the first African American to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He retired. Yeah, he retired as the all-time leader in interceptions with 79. That now Paul Krause has made 81. But Emlyn Tennell, when he retired, he was the all-time leader in interceptions.
All right, and speaking of the Giants and black players, I think they were the last team to start a black quarterback. And it was Geno Smith recently, I want to say Eli Manning's last year with the Giants. So maybe that's part of the ick.
Well, it could be. And again, this is another pod for another day. But the Giants, I don't believe, have had a black head coach.
No.
The Giants are still owned by the family who was one of the families who was keeping the league segregated. So that's it's one of the things we don't really talk about, and it's why the NFL doesn't celebrate its integration the way that baseball celebrates its integration, right? You've got everybody wearing 42. You've got this April 15th is the big ceremony around that. Baseball celebrates that. They produce movies about it, and the NFL doesn't do that because 4 or 5 of the families who are responsible for that are still owning teams and very prominent in the NFL. And if you do that, then you have to talk about why that was.
Exactly. It's a dirty little secret, skeleton in the closet, whatever phrase you want to use, but that is very true. So we had the same linebackers, by the way. Of course, I think all slam dunk picks. And then for the corners and DBs, so I had Dick Lynch as one of my corners.
Yeah.
So he was there in the 50s and 60s, 37 interceptions. All these guys have insane interception numbers. And then Mark Haynes as well. And then my two safeties, same, Jimmy Patton and Emlyn Tennell. So we are aligned on most of the defense. I think there wasn't many honorable mention choices.
There really wasn't.
Maybe on defensive line, some people were saying, Justin Tuck, Osi Umenyiora. I'm like, they're not Hall of Famers, so I couldn't fit them in there. And then head coach. Who'd you have for head coach?
Bill Parcells. One of the things that we don't talk about is that the Giants have probably had the best assistant coach tradition
in
NFL history, right? So in 1958, Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry are on the same staff as coordinators, one offensive coordinator, one defensive coordinator. So you've got those two guys, and they both go off to be all-time legends. And then you got Belichick, who is the DC for Parcells, goes off to be an all-time legend. Yeah. So you've got Parcells being this obviously a great coach, but three of the greatest coaches of all time were coordinators for the Giants as well. So I just found that interesting.
Hell of a tradition. Yeah. That, I think he was the easy pick. Maybe Steve Owen for the old school stuff, but I think Parcells in the challenges of the era that he had to deal with. I think he's up there. All right. So we'll jump over to the Philadelphia Eagles. So this time I will go first and Mack will compare his team. So we'll start with the quarterbacks. This was kind of tough. I gotta say.
There was a lot of good, there were several options here.
Yeah. So there's, Norm Van Brocklin, Donovan McNabb, maybe Jalen Hurts in 10 years. Who knows if he's still around on the team. But I ended up going with Randall Cunningham. And we talked about some people that, players that changed the game or revolutionized the position. He is definitely one of those guys. Just an absolute gazelle of an athlete.
Yes.
Long, lean. He looked more like a wide receiver than a quarterback. He's 6'4", maybe 210 if we're being generous. And just one of the most dynamic athletes to ever play the quarterback position. And he was also accomplished, 3-time Pro Bowler.
Yep.
He was Offensive Player of the Year. He was runner-up for Offensive Player of the Year twice and runner-up for MVP twice.
With the Eagles. With the Eagles, and then another time with the Vikings.
Well, that's the thing, right? If he had that season with the Vikings that he had, if he had it with the Eagles, he would be a slam dunk pick. He's MVP or whatever, all first team All Pro, all that stuff.
Right.
But of course, that comes after his short retirement. But that he was my pick for quarterback.
Yeah. I went with Donovan McNabb and you could make a strong case for Randall Cunningham, not only for what he did for the Eagles, but how he impacted the position. I mean, he's the bridge between Fran Tarkenton and Michael Vick, right? You've got him and maybe Steve Young as well, right? So Fran Tarkenton, if you're in the evolution of the quarterback, Fran Tarkenton scrambled to pass. Donovan McNabb was one of the first ones that scrambled to hurt you with his legs.
Yes.
Right. So he was trying to gain yards too. And he had that cannon of an arm, the 65 to 70 yards, air yards type of arm, right? So he had it all. And he was unfortunate to have played for coaches that didn't know what to do with that. Certainly not with the Eagles. They were a defensive team when he was there. Yeah. And he was just, they just
kind of handcuffed.
Exactly. But I can easily see Randall Cunningham here, but I put McNabb here just for his body of work with the Eagles specifically.
Yeah. I mean, it was a tough choice. It wasn't like a slam dunk pick. I was, picking nits a little bit on this one. Yeah. All right. And then the skill guys or pass catchers, however you're going to say it, not a lot here, I got to say. So I went with two running backs. So my first running back, old school guy, Steve Van Buren.
Yes.
5-time All-Pro, All-40s team, Hall of Famer. And then LaShawn Shady McCoy, one of my favorite nicknames. He's a franchise rushing leader. He would have been a slam dunk pick if he wasn't traded by Chip Kelly in the middle of his career. And he went on to do great things in Buffalo as well, but he was an excellent player in Philadelphia. And then for my wide receivers, I went with a very old school guy, Pete Pihos or Pihos. I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Pihos. I think the H is silent. So Pete Pihos.
Pihos. Okay. Played there 47 to 55, 6-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All Pro. So incredible player for his era. And then Harold Carmichael, who was an interesting study. When I was looking at his numbers and the accolades, you can probably tell me better, but I don't know how he was in the Hall of Fame. I need.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I mean, you know he's a Hall of Famer, but when you compare him, again, accolades, numbers, when you compare him to other wide receivers of the era, it doesn't seem to match up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was a 4-time second team All-Pro, or sorry, no, I'm looking at another. He was a 2-time second team All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler. You're like, okay, he was a all-time great Eagle, franchise receiver, or franchise leader in yards and receptions, which is, you know, a great achievement, especially considering how long ago he played. But yeah, I was like, I don't see Hall of Fame here. Maybe it was the size, maybe it was the story. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then my tight end, I went with Pete Retzlaff, who was there from 56 to 66. 5-time Pro Bowler. He's got, I think he's second all-time on the team in receiving yards, which is, again, quite an achievement for a guy that ended his career in 1966. It kind of speaks to some of the weakness at the position. They've had some incredible players play there. I'm wearing, you know, Terrell Owens' jersey here. They had Deshaun Jackson for a little bit, but no one, A.J. Brown is another great recent example, but they just haven't had someone stay there long enough to compile the numbers. And the
that's fair. That's fair. So I've got most of the same. So Van Buren, I got into spirited discussions online when I made my Mount Rushmore for the Eagles and put Van Buren on it because a lot of the current fans don't know him.
No, they don't.
You know, 5-time first-team All-Pro, 4-time rushing champion in 8 seasons, and twice an NFL champion. Right. In any other, if he did that in any other era, you'd be like, okay, it's obvious.
Yeah.
But people don't know him. Shady McCoy, I have him as well. I've got Carmichael. I've got Pios. Pios is interesting to me because, again, all of these guys played pre-passing era, right? So the numbers aren't going to look good. You almost have to go to accolades and other things. But Pios, if you go online and you watch him, highlights of him, he's a tight end. He's listed as a wide receiver, but he is really a Gronk-like figure. You know, he wasn't Ditka rightly gets the moniker of being the pioneer as tight end because he lined up in line, right, as a tight end. Pios didn't, but the way that if you look at his highlights, you feel like you're looking at a tight end, not a wide receiver. And then Tommy McDonald is my third, and he was a multiple All-Pro with the Eagles. He was also one of his, you know, little nugget, one of his claims to fame is he's believed to be the last player to play without a face mask. Wow. So he, you know, once face masks became required, and then they were, you know, if you played in an era prior to face mask, you got to choose. Yeah. Most players chose to wear one because it's football.
That makes sense. Right?
Yeah, but he did not, and I believe into the late 60s, he was not wearing. He was not, and I say players, non-kicker players, because kickers for a long time didn't wear them either. Once we started having specialized guys who only kicked, you know, some of them wouldn't wear a face mask, but he was the last non-specialist to regularly not wear a face mask.
It's like the hockey guys that got grandfathered into it. Would play without a mask, and now they're playing
and
full shield.
Same thing with baseball and batting helmets. You could not wear a batting helmet, and then for a while you could not, like Ozzie Smith. I grew up in St. Louis, and Ozzie Smith was famous for wearing the batting helmet that didn't have any flaps because he was allowed to do that, right? And now that's not allowed in baseball either.
Which I think makes sense.
Yes, lots of sense.
Yeah, all right. And then for the offensive line, so I think pretty strong group. For my tackles, I went with 2 more recent guys. So Jason Peters, my left tackle, played there for 10 years, ton of accolades. And then Lane Johnson, who's a active player. I think this is his last year. I believe he announced it this offseason. Very accomplished player, 2-time Super Bowl champ, all that good stuff. And then for my guards, I went with Evan Mathis. Again, a more recent player, and then reaching way back to Al Wistert as my right guard. He played mostly right tackle, but at the end of his career, he played some right guard, so I was able to finagle him in there. Our favorite word. And then center, Jason Kelsey, again, more recent guy. Just an incredibly dominant stretch of his career where he's 6-time first-team All-Pro, the pioneer of the tush push. He is the guy that made the tush push what it is. Because it's, you know, as we saw last year, it's not nearly as effective without him in the middle. Just an
it's not
player.
infallible. It's which probably means that it guarantees that we're going to have it, right? Because if it were completely unstoppable and everybody could do it, then they would. And since it's not that, I think we're going to continue to have it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And your offensive line?
My offensive line, I've got three of the same guys. I've got at center, I've got Kelsey. Just like you said, a dominant stretch. He had basically it appears as he's an unknown for the first half of his career, and then the last half of his career, he's got six first-team All-Pros in his last 7 seasons, I believe it was. So, my tackles are Lane Johnson and Jason Peters, and then for guards, it was interesting that how few accolades the Eagles guards have had over the years. So I went with two guys that are fairly recent. One guy's still on the team, Landon Dickerson, and then Brandon Brooks, who are the only two Eagles to have as many as 3 Pro Bowls in the history of the franchise. So I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and do this. I toyed with the idea of putting Chuck Bednarik in there and sliding somebody around because Bednarik, as
move Kelsey to guard, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Bednarik, as most football fans should know, is the last considered to be the last 60-minute man, the last player to play regularly both sides, and he played at an All-Pro level both sides at center and at linebacker. So, and he played until 1960 was his final season. So I toyed with the idea of putting there, but I have him as an honorable mention instead.
Yeah, he's still on the team, I'm sure.
Yes, he's on the team.
All right, we'll jump over to the defense. So we'll go start with my defensive line. So the slam dunk number 1 pick on the team, I think, period, is Reggie White, of course, the Minister of Defense. Yes. I think as we've gone through this, it's really cool to see how many guys make it on 2 all-time teams. And of course, he's one of them. He's an all-time Packer and of course an all-time Eagle as well. And he's still revered and loved at that city, despite, leaving to go win his Super Bowl with the Packers. Right. So
yes.
My other edge is Clyde Simmons, played there from 86 to 93. Obviously not quite as accomplished as Reggie White, but still a 3-time All-Pro. And then on my interior, I went with Jerome Brown, who played, the majority of his career next to Reggie White. I'm sure that helped his numbers quite a bit. Still a dominant player. And Fletcher Cox, who is a more recent player, but an Eagles lifer, played there for 12 years and was a major piece of that Super Bowl team that took down the Patriots.
Yes. All right. We got the same front four. And Jerome Brown's obviously the tragic, he died as an active player in a car accident, I believe it was. And he was just starting to ascend as a player next to Reggie White. But it's interesting that both of us have 3 of our 4 players, they played together on a 91 team that was, they were all first team All-Pros in 1991. And it's insane that team didn't somehow do more than it didn't even play in a Super Bowl with players that good on both offense and defense. But that's football, right? You need all the ingredients to get some success. So all right, my linebackers, so a fairly strong group, I would say. So we'll start with Jeremiah Trotter, one of my linebackers. So he had 2 different stints with the Eagles, 2-time All-Pro altogether. So not the strongest selection here, but, we work with it. And then I went with Bill Bergey, who was there from 74 to 80, 5-time All-Pro altogether. So, quite an accomplishment for this short period he was there. And then, of course, Chuck Bednarik, who was another slam dunk pick here, Concrete Charlie, great nickname. Charlie.
I was disappointed to learn that it's because he sold concrete in the offseason and not because he's
it had nothing to do with him on the field, although it fits, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's a great nickname. It makes sense, right? But it's the origin of it is not as cool as the nickname itself.
And he is, in my opinion, he is the owner, or he is the subject of one of the most, if not the most iconic photograph in football history. Which is him standing over a recently knocked out Frank Gifford, and kind of pointing down. He knocks him out cold, and there's this famous shot of him looking and pointing down or kind of gesturing down at Frank Gifford as he's completely laid out on the field.
Yeah,
and Gifford as a result of that play, didn't play I believe it was in the 1960, might have been, it was a championship game, I believe. So Gifford did not play the next season after that and didn't return to the game until 1962 as a result of that hit, if I have that correct. So Chuck Bednarik.
Just an incredible player. So did you have, what were your linebackers?
I had Bednarik, I had Bilbergi, but I went with Maxie Baughan. Maxie Baughan is a huge Hall of Fame snub. He was a 2-time All-Pro with the Eagles. He was a 3-time All-Pro with the Rams after he left the Eagles. So another 5-time All-Pro player who's not in the Hall of Fame. So instead of Trotter, I have Maxie Baughan to go with Bednarik and Bilbergi.
Right. Then the defensive backs. So my cornerbacks, I went with Eric Allen, who is a recent Hall of Fame inductee.
Yep.
So I love him. He's a great player on the Raiders as well, a little later in his career. And then Troy Vincent as my other corner, a little more recent guy. So between the two of them, they both have 2 or 3 All-Pro selections. So among the best at their position. And then strong safety, one of my favorite players ever, favorite non-Raiders, that's Brian Dawkins, Weapon X.
Weapon X.
Just one of the most intimidating players, in recent NFL history, who just played with a ferocity that was borderline, homicidal. I don't know how else to describe it.
I mean, the hit that he laid on Algie Crumpler in, I think it was the divisional round. Algie Crumpler was a huge tight end. He probably went 260 or 270. And Brian
That's probably what he was listed at. He might have been closer to 300.
He might have been closer to 300. He was reminiscent of Darnell Washington on the.
Yes.
He was trending, maybe not as big as Washington, but trending towards that. And Dawkins just folded him. Oh my goodness.
That's what he did. And I loved the intro. He would crawl out on all 4, the bear crawl, all that stuff.
All of that. Loved it.
And then for my other safety, not a lot of choices here, I got to say. So I went with Malcolm Jenkins, who was a 3-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ, a very nice guy. I happened to meet him out in the streets, I think in 21. So very nice guy. Maybe I'm a little biased as a result. But so those are my DBs.
Yeah, I've got the same except for, so I've got Allen, I've got Vincent, I've got Weapon X, but I went with Bill Bradley instead of Malcolm Jenkins. Bill Bradley is one of 3 players tied for the franchise lead in interceptions. I believe it's Eric Allen and Brian Dawkins and he all have 34. So I went with him, a 2-time first-team All-Pro instead.
Love it. And then for my head coach, I think Andy Reid, despite not winning a Super Bowl, that's who I went with. I think the success, he started them on that track. He left, Doug Peterson's part of his coaching tree. So I guess he gets some credit for that Super Bowl as well. But
I think that's, Reid's a good choice there. And I did the same thing.
All right. Let's jump over to the Washington Commanders. Are we going with Commanders or Redskins? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. There's no Commanders on it. I'm not sure if I mentioned a Commander. Anybody who has played with the Commanders. So they started out as the Boston Braves, then the Boston Redskins, then the Washington Redskins, then the football team, right? For a while.
Which I liked. I kind of liked that. It was different.
I liked it too. So, but no, my take on that is it's a slur. It's offensive, but it's also what the team was called.
Yeah.
And you could, not to open a can of worms, but we call the Negro Leagues the Negro Leagues, but calling an African-American a Negro is not the way we do that anymore. But we call it the Negro Leagues because that's what the league was called.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those, right? The United Negro College Fund. I mean, that's another example.
Right, exactly.
But
so
it's just the team anachronism, I think is what it would be called.
Yes.
Right?
The team was called the Redskins, and I am fully supportive of their changing it. I would be wildly against them changing it back. But if we're talking about the history of the team, most of these guys played for the Washington Redskins.
I feel like they're trying to kind of crawl back there with they had the uniform change that looks just like their old ones with a different logo. I think they brought the spear back in the W.
Yeah,
so
I mean
they're trying.
Yeah. Well, and if we're being honest, the only reason why it changed in the first place was probably PR. Right? Daniel Snyder was in
100%
loads of trouble.
Yes, he was.
He was trying to do a misdirection by doing this. So, but. They are most of the guys we're going to talk about. Maybe everyone. I think I have one honorable mention that might have played for the Commanders. Otherwise, these are all Washington Redskins.
All right. Okay. So over to you for
right.
the quarterback.
The quarterback is, I mean, I think it's obvious. I mean, I'm assuming other people would too. It's Sammy Baugh. And Sammy Baugh obviously played in the 1940s, but he was their best quarterback in their history. He was also at the same time, he was the best punter and the best safety in the league at the same time as he was the best quarterback in the league. So he has a season, I can't remember exactly which one, but he has a season where he had led the league in passing, in interceptions, and in punting in the same season. So
I love that era.
He's that guy slinging Sammy Baugh, and he was famous enough that he was a movie star too. He starred in several movies under his Slinging Sammy name. So he's the quarterback one. You know, when you look at the recent history that the franchise has had, you know, Gibbs famously won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, right? So there's not, and those 3 guys combined, I think, have 4 career Pro Bowls. So not only were they different, none of them were all-timers in terms of and certainly not in terms of their football. So Sammy Baugh has to be the answer.
Yeah. Same for me as well. I mean, he was an easy pick. You know, I think Joe Theismann maybe gets an honorable mention. He did have a first-team All-Pro season later in his career, but obviously not the same.
Jaden Daniels is, of all the teams that we've done, he might be the player in the league who has the best shot at usurping the all-time quarterback in his franchise.
Yeah. Oh, easily. I think give him I mean, hopefully if he stays healthy for the next, 10 years or so.
Maybe Caleb Williams. He might have a shot too.
Oh yeah, that's not a hard mountain to climb. I think we talked about Josh Allen potentially.
Yeah, he's close. He's close. I think he's got to win, but he's close. But yeah, so he's one of those that might have a shot.
Yeah, and then shout out Sonny Jurgensen. He had a great little run with them. But
he did. He played. Not little. He's a Hall of Famer. He played. He played most of his. He started with the Eagles, but he played most of his career with the Redskins. But he wasn't at Sammy Baugh level. Yeah. Although, I mean, this what people don't know. He's kind of, if you want to say he was like Dan Fouts was, you got Drew Brees, who had a lot of passing stats in the more recent era. Dan Fouts was that guy in the 80s. Sonny Jurgensen was that guy in the 60s.
Yeah.
He led the league, I believe he led the league in passing 5 times in the 1960s.
Yeah, so, very prolific passer.
Yeah, so he threw it around, but the Redskins themselves weren't any good during that. Yeah. Running backs, I've got 2. I've got Larry Brown, who's the 1972 MVP. He was a multiple Pro Bowler, multiple All-Pro. And again, he's someone that people don't remember because he didn't have the longest career, but the MVP before him, we talk about a lot. Alan Page, the MVP after him, we talk about a lot. O.J. Simpson, we don't talk about him hardly at all. But he helped lead the 1972 Redskins to the Super Bowl to then meet the undefeated Dolphins, who stayed undefeated as a result of that. But and then John Riggins. I don't know. He's an interesting case for me. He was all decade for the 1980s, but he started his career in 1971. So he is I believe he's the record holder for running backs after the age of 34, I think it is. You know, he had just this resurgence or surge, if you want to call it that, at the end of his career.
Yeah, not even a resurgence, just a surge.
Yeah. Super Bowl MVP and a Hall of Famer. So John Riggins. And then my wideouts, I've got 3. Art Monk. I grew up on Art Monk. He was, the Redskin at the time in those 1980s. He had for the long time, he had the record for most games with a catch, most consecutive games with a catch. That was one of the big things that was talked about with him. I've got Charlie Taylor, who was an excellent wideout predominantly in the 60s with the Redskins, also a Hall of Famer. And then Gary Clark, who is number 2, I believe it is, in receiving yards. And he was one of the 80s, the Smurfs, with those 80s successful teams. So Art Monk, Charlie Taylor, Gary Clark.
So we had actually 5 for 5. So, and I think it's a product of not many choices outside of that. So yeah, I tried to see if Clinton Portis could fit on here. I think he had the best two or single or two seasons for a Washington running back, but just couldn't fit him on there. Not a great tight end tradition. Maybe the one Jerry Smith, you could kind of try to fit him in there. He was there for a long time. Didn't have the accolades of some of these other guys, but aside from the top three pass catchers, and of course the John Riggins, not much else to be, Yeah,
I mean, I have on my honorable mention list, if I look at the running backs and receivers together, I've got Bobby Mitchell, I've got Terry McLaurin, I've got Clinton Portis, kind of in that vicinity.
Moss, throw him in there, maybe. But
I think the guys that we have are the right ones. Larry Brown, Riggins, Monk, Taylor, Clark. Those are the right ones for this franchise, I believe.
Yeah. And then the Hogs, who you got for the Hogs?
You know what? I thought it was appropriate just to put all the Hogs in. I mean, I know that you could certainly make an argument that Trent Williams was one of the best tackles for the Redskins. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler for the Redskins. Chris Samuel was a 6-time Pro Bowler for the Redskins. But given the success this team had, and it was because of these guys, I've got all the charter members. So I've got Jeff Bostic, Russ Grimm, Joe Jacoby, Mark May, George Stark. Bostic, Grimm, and Jacoby were with them for all three Super Bowls, Super Bowl 17, 22, 26. May was with two of them, 17 and 22. Stark was only the first one, 17. But they're a match set to me. And you gotta put them all in. So, and even honorable mention, I've got Don Warren, who was a tight end, basically a blocking tight end for all three championships as well. So honorable mention, I've got Don Warren as a tight end-ish lineman, Trent Williams and Chris Samuels, but I've got Bostic, Grimm, Jacoby, May, and Stark as the line.
Okay.
So collectively known as the Hogs.
Yeah, the Hogs. I love it. So I went in a different direction. So I'll go, I went a little more individual, but so my tackles, Jacoby, as you mentioned, and then I went with Trent Williams as the right tackle. There's not too many careers like his, I gotta say, where, I think maybe it's a product of just how bad the team was, how dysfunctional it was, how I don't think it's a strong thing to say that they almost killed the guy with their medical incompetence.
The mismanagement of his care.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw it again with Alex Smith and the way they handled that. So not a great organization under Dan Snyder, and who was there for a long time, dark time, I think, for the team, and just the way they treated their players and they treated their cheerleaders and their fans and everything else. But that's a separate topic.
Right.
So for my guards, I went with Russ Grimm, one of my favorite names in NFL history. Just he sounds like the monster that lives under your bed or whatever. Just an incredible name. And then Dick Stanfill was my other right guard, who's there just a few years in the 50s, but 3-time first-team All-Pro and a Hall of Famer. And then for my center, I went with Len House, who was there from 64 to 77. Also a 5-time Pro Bowler.
70s, that when they were good in the 70s, in that era, he was there,
192 consecutive starts for him with the Commanders or Redskins, or whatever you want to call them. But the very strong offensive line tradition, even aside from the Hogs. Chris Samuels, you mentioned, he was almost there for me, but I think Williams had one or two more Pro Bowls than him during his stretch. So I was like, all right. But I loved, he was an iconic player too, even with his look. I mean, I just remember him from that era.
It's interesting, just like you say with Trent Williams, just like Kelsey, how when you look at the front half of his career versus the back half, like he went from being a good player to being considered no doubt, to many fans, a no doubt Hall of Famer, the best tackle in the league. And that happened in year 10 plus in the league. It's astounding.
He's almost 40 and he's still trucking along. I think he's coming off a second team All-Pro season. So good for him.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So now we're in on defense, and I'm going 4-3, maybe 5-2. We'll see what you think about this. So, off the edge, I've got Dexter Manley and Charles Mann. So those were the two edges in their heyday, the last most recent heyday, and then Dave Butts, who was also in that same era, and Dyron Talbert, who was a little earlier. He was he was on the 70s, in that 70s era as a defensive tackle. So those are my four. But my linebackers, one of my linebackers is Ryan Kerrigan. who is he's, if you want to call that the fifth, because he's really an edge. He's not a linebacker. Chris Hanberger, who is a Hall of Famer and who was one of in my opinion, one of the best 4 players in Redskins history, as a linebacker. And then London Fletcher is my other linebacker. So my front 7 has 2 linebackers, an edge, and then 4 down linemen.
Yeah, there you go. So pretty similar. So the edges for me, Dexter Manley and Charles Mann. And then for my interior guys, I went with Dave Butts and then Gene Brito, or Brito, I believe that's how you say it, who's there in the 50s primarily, a 5-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro across first and second team. And then linebackers, we had the exact same guys. So Hamburger, Fletcher, and Kerrigan. Fletcher is a interesting case study in like longevity at the position. I don't know how many linebackers have played as long as he did, as consistently as he did, without reaching, I would say, the elite level. Like, he was always a good player. I don't know how many times he was a great player.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, he was not viewed that way. The people who will support him will look at his tackle numbers and see that they're very similar to Ray Lewis's tackle numbers and wonder why there's such a difference in the way that these 2 players are viewed. Now, I think part of that has to do with, when you watch the games, Ray Lewis is clearly, he's dominating play in a way that most players in the history of the game haven't, right? So it's not just number of tackles, but I do think that Fletcher is underrated as well, right? If you're able to do it for as long as he did it and the accolades just weren't there, that's not entirely his fault that the accolades weren't there.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. And then your defensive backs.
Defensive backs, I played around a little bit here. So Darrell Green obviously is, he's a Mount Rushmore Washington Redskin. He's here. I put Champ Bailey here. Now, he played most of his career with the Broncos, but he was a superstar player in his 5 years with the Redskins as well. So that's Champ. I've got Ken Houston as one of my safeties. And you know what? I put him here. I put Sammy Baugh as the other safety.
Okay. Why not?
Now, I think we have to mention Paul Krause, who also started his career with the Redskins, and we have to mention Sean Taylor, who was who would have been who was on track to be one of the best safeties of all time. So if you wanted to put Taylor here instead of Sammy Baugh, I'm 100% supportive of that. But given that Baugh was a great defensive back in his era, I'm like, okay, let's go with that as well.
Why not? All right. So we aligned pretty closely. So I had Darrell Green and Champ Bailey. I think they were pretty slam dunk picks, even though Champ Bailey wasn't there for that long. And then for my safeties, I went with Ken Houston. I actually went with Paul Krause.
Okay.
I wanted to put Sean Taylor there. I guess they're kind of interchangeable. He just was not there long enough. Obviously, we know about the circumstances. Very tragic. But I obviously wouldn't be mad if you put him in there. Not a lot of great candidates ahead of him. We can say at least that the other safety position. And then your coach.
It's got to be Gibbs. And I've got so much respect for, again, 3 quarterbacks, three Super Bowl championships, 3 different quarterbacks. He comes from the Don Coryell tree, right? So he's an offensive genius of that mold, and he that sustained excellence and being able to do it with different players. If you're talking about if you're trying to determine who are the greatest coaches of all time, you're trying to figure out how you should do that. I think the credit has to be given for being able to do it with different rosters versus I had my quarterback in place for 15 years and I built around him. No, I had to make adjustments to this thing over time, and I still had the team going at that level over time. So I probably have Gibbs on my all-time list higher than other non-Washington fans might, because of that. I have so much respect for that.
Totally fair. And in an era with the Giants being great, the Niners being great, the Bears they had their brief period. So it's remarkable that they won the 3 Super Bowls in that era. Again, without that big name quarterback or any sustained quarterback.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
All right. So we've flirted with the appetizers. We've had a couple drinks. We've had the bread basket, and now we're here for the main course. America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Just absurd from top to bottom. So many choices.
So much talent.
Just about every position.
Yeah.
So I will go
to the point where, and because it's the Cowboys too, I mean, you can almost, if you know football like we know football, you're of the history of the game, you can almost do this from memory. Right. There's so many. I mean, we're making 22-man teams. They've got 15 Hall of Famers that played the majority of their career with the Cowboys. So you just, and then guys that aren't yet in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you just got so many choices.
Yeah. I would argue that you could build a second team that would compete with many of the all-time teams.
Yes.
All right. So we'll start with quarterback. To me, it's a slam dunk pick. It's Roger Staubach.
Yes. I don't think there's a discussion. There's a discussion.
Shout out Troy Aikman, 3 Super Bowls, great achievement. But Roger Staubach was the better quarterback, and he has 2 Super Bowls, so it's not like he's that far behind. So you agree?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, it's I mean, the better debate would be like, how big is the gap? Right? It's not, and I think that given the 3 Super Bowls, Troy has to be number 2. But so he's not in danger of not being the second, but I don't think it's a close discussion between, it's not 1 and 1A. It's 1 and it's 2.
Yeah. And I think Troy would agree as well. All right. So over to the skill position guys. So quite a group here. I went with 2 running backs. Yeah. So number 1, Emmitt Smith, the all-time rushing leader, all kinds of accolades. And I do want to put a pin in this real quick. I'll come back to it when you get your turn. And then Tony Dorsett was my other running back who was just an incredible player for his era. So from 77 to 85, he had over 1,000 yards in every season except for one. That's when he played 9 games due to injury. So very consistent.
No. Was it 9 games due to injury, or was it 82 when there was a strike?
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah. It was 82.
So it wasn't even his injury. It was the fact that no one had played more than 9 games.
That's right. So incredibly dominant and consistent player for a long time.
I believe he retired as number 2 all time in rushing.
Yeah. At the time. Yeah, that's right. And then for my pass catchers, I went with the 2 88s, Michael Irvin and Drew Pearson, who there was a 5-year gap between them, but a lot of it's a long stretch of incredible wide receiver play for these Cowboy fans. Very spoiled. And then my tight end, I went with Jason Witten, who is probably the most boring all-time great. So, I feel like the best route he ever run was like a 5-yard out, but he was always open. Nothing special athletically about him, it seemed like, but he was just always open.
Durability. That's, availability is an ability, and he was available for a very long time at a high level.
Exactly. All right. And I wanted to get CeeDee Lamb on here just for the 388s, but not enough room for him.
I've got exactly the same. I shout out Bob Hayes because we don't talk enough about him. He was, for those who don't know, he was an Olympic gold medal sprinter in 1964, but he was actually a football player as well. So when he was, so he wasn't someone who didn't play football. Like, after he inspired a whole era of, let's just get track stars out here and try to teach them how to play football. And that didn't work very well, but he was an amazing football player. And some fans credit him with necessitating and creating zone defense because he was so fast that no one could cover him. Wow. So I wanted to put him on here, but I ended up the same place you were, Irvin, Pearson, and Witten, with Bob Hayes as honorable mention.
Strong group. A strong wide receiver group, strong position group, obviously, in general. All right. Offensive line. So for my tackles, I went with Tyron Smith as my left tackle, just a comically large human being. I always remember him he wears the knee braces, or he would wear the knee braces as elbow braces, just because he's just
so big. Yeah,
exactly. And then Rayfield Wright as my right tackle, so different era, 67 to 79. So very long time Cowboy, very consistent player. And then my guards, I went with Larry Allen, who is cartoonishly strong. I think they said he would bench 700 pounds.
Some crazy number like that. Yeah.
And then Zach Martin, more recent guy who was, just as dominant, 7-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, so 9-time Pro Bowl or All Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, so slam dunk Hall of Famer as soon as he's eligible. And then Travis Frederick as my center. So again, a little more recent guy, didn't have the team success, but still a very dominant player in his era.
Yeah, he's Frederick. It's a sad story, but I'm not sure if it was injury or it was something odd. Like it wasn't a football type injury that kept him out. It was a
disease of some sort.
Yeah. But I went with the same four, but instead of Frederick, I went with Mark Stepnoski. Okay. So he was my fifth, but Smith, Rayfield Wright, Larry Allen, Zach Martin, honorable mention Eric Williams. A lot of Cowboy fans are going to say Eric Williams here, but I went with Tyron Smith ahead of Eric Williams.
Yeah. Throw Nate Newton in there as an
honorable mention. but yes and no. I mean, he was a nice player, but he's not in the same vicinity as Allen or Martin, and that's who he'd be compared to. So that's
no room for him, which is okay. Yeah, all right, before we jump over the defense, I want to get your take on Emmitt Smith. The popular insults get slung at him as, if Barry Sanders was behind that offensive line, it would be a different story. He'd be the one leading the league in rushing and the all-time leader. So what are your thoughts on Emmitt Smith?
Well, I mean, again, it's one of those, we talked a little earlier about Eli being a kind of a flashpoint. Yeah. For whatever reason, the Emmitt Smith fans and the Barry Sanders if I post a Barry Sanders,
oil and water.
I can post a video about Emmitt Smith and get 50 comments about Barry Sanders. And it's not even mentioned. Not even mentioned. Where we should just be appreciating the greatness of both of these players. Mm-hmm. They were great for different reasons, but they were still great. And for people who want to knock Emmitt, he had the greatest line ever assembled, all of that. I direct you to, I believe it's either the 91 or the 92 season where he held out, or maybe it was 93, where he held out he wanted a new contract. He held out. I think it was 93. He held out. The Cowboys are 0-2. And they rushed for 100 yards combined in those two games without Emmitt. He comes back and they win 15 of their next 17 games. If it were that easy, then they could have put any stiff in there. The team fell apart when he wasn't there. And that should have answered any question you had. There was another instance, and again, I'm blanking on the year, but they needed to win a game the week 16 for playoff positioning. Emmitt in the second quarter separates his shoulder.
Yes.
And then goes on to touch the ball like 40-something times total for 230 yards on a separated shoulder, and he can't even get up off the ground. They're pulling him up because he's in so much pain. If you're a football fan and you're aware of both of these things and you still knock Emmitt, I'm not sure why. It's a Cowboys thing, I suppose. I mean,
it's definitely a Cowboys thing. Yeah. It's the jealousy. It's the understandable bitterness of some Barry Sanders fans because of how bad his teams were for so long. And the fact that his career got short. But I think you and I think one of the reasons we vibe is that we kind of operate under the same principle of you don't need to knock someone down to uplift someone else. Yes. You can appreciate both. You can appreciate the historical significance. You can say, Barry probably would have been better maybe he would have better numbers.
Maybe
not better than Emmitt. I don't mean better than Emmitt. I just mean his numbers and all that.
I think part of why we remember Barry so well is because of all his great escapes, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
this is true.
I mean, it's not just like when people talk about loving Barry, they talk about, they don't generally talk about 10 All-Pros in 10 seasons.
Yeah.
They say put in the tape.
Exactly.
and watch him do his thing, right? So, his numbers are incredible, right? That he averaged 1,500 yards per season for 10 seasons. He was never not an All-Pro. But then Emmitt Smith is the all-time leader among running backs. He's the all-time leader in touchdowns. He's the all-time leader in scrimmage yards. He's the
and his tape is not too shabby either. Watch the highlights. It's not all the offensive line. There's plenty of tough runs, plenty of
exactly. And the offense was built around him, and everything worked off of him. And like I said, the Exhibit A is his and I believe that was his MVP season too, when he missed the first 2 games. And it's just like you can't say that it was all the offensive line and be aware that the team fell apart in weeks 1 and 2 without him. I mean, you just
100%.
you're not being fair. You're not making a rational decision for saying that.
Absolutely. All right. Glad we agree.
Yes.
All right. So we'll jump over to the defense, and what a defense this is.
My goodness.
So you could go 3-4, 4-3, kind of interchangeable.
Do whatever you want.
But so for my down linemen, my guys with their hands in the dirt. So for my edges, I went with DeMarcus Ware. So more recent guy, Hall of Famer, 7-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler with the Cowboys, and Harvey Martin, who was a 4-time All-Pro, also Defensive Player of the Year in 1977, and co-MVP of the Super Bowl. And then for my interior guys, what a group. I mean, I think we talked about a Mount Rushmore position group with, them, the Rams, the Vikings, and of course the Cowboys. I went with Bob Lilly and Randy White, who did not overlap. So again, a great run of interior defensive line play from 1961 to 1988. So Cowboys, very spoiled.
Yeah, think about that. From 61 to 88, I believe that was something like 12 or 13 first-team All-Pros from their defensive tackle.
14, yeah. 7. So 7 and 2 for Bob Lee for first and second team. And then also 7 and 2 for Randy White.
14 in those 19 seasons or something. 14 first team All-Pros. My goodness.
And throw another 4 second team All-Pro, which, as we've discussed, I feel like is still great.
And I actually reached out. I mean, I think we might have talked this before, but I've reached out to Pro Football Reference again. I want to be able to pull just All-Pros because especially in a 32-team league, if you're an All-Pro of any type, you've done something. And
we need to add it at the top.
Yeah.
Add it at the top.
Exactly.
They deserve it.
And we need to be talking about that more because especially with the devaluing of the Pro Bowl, we need to be able to easily talk more about All-Pros first and second team.
And then for my linebackers, so 3 linebackers, you kind of throw DeMarcus Ware in there as well. I went with Chuck Howley. And Leroy Jordan. And then kind of a surprising pick for me, maybe, but I went with Micah Parsons. Who kind of, to me, similar to Khalil Mack on the Raiders, where I needed to fit him in there because he wasn't there for that long, obviously, but his start to his career just incredibly dominant. He was there for 4 years, and he was a 3-time All-Pro, 2-time first-team Defensive Rookie of the Year, 4-time Pro Bowler. He just had another first-team All-Pro season in Green Bay, so he probably would have done it in Dallas too. Yeah,
probably would have done it in Dallas. Yeah,
I think he's the only active player that I have, at least on this defense.
Right. I'm close. Obviously, Lilly and White, Ware and Martin, completely with you there. Shout out to Too Tall Jones. He deserves some love there. The Cowboys, I believe. The Cowboys have 3 players with 100 sacks or more for their franchise.
Yes.
And that's and Too Tall, I believe, is one of those with Harvey Martin and Randy White. So they're just a great tradition of getting after the quarterback with this franchise. Linebacker Chuck Howley, the first and probably the only Super Bowl MVP for a losing team. That's his claim to fame. So he was the Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl V, a game that the Cowboys lost. Leroy Jordan. And then I went with Sean Lee as linebacker. I know, Micah, that's a great choice, but I wanted to go with an off-ball linebacker, and Sean Lee is their franchise leader among linebackers for tackles. They're franchise leader for tackles. We haven't mentioned him yet, but we're about to.
All right, we'll get there. All right. Okay, for my defensive backs, I went with Deion Sanders as my CB1 and Mel Renfro, CB2. And then Cornell Green, I think, is my honorable mention for that position. He's right in there. Deion, I mean, I think for me, at least, this is his 3rd team. I don't think he made your Niners team, but he made my Niners team, made my Falcons team. Yes. And he made my Cowboys team.
No, I couldn't put him on the Niners on one season, but he's on the Falcons and he's on the Cowboys.
Yeah. And then for my safeties, I went with Cliff Harris and Darren Woodson. So I think Darren Woodson is the franchise tackles leader.
Yes.
I think he is a underrated player, definitely overshadowed because he played in that era with Ed Reed. He kind of overlapped, I believe, with Troy Polamalu, Brian Dawkins. So he definitely doesn't get the love that I think some of these other guys get when you talk about all-time greats.
Agreed. And he's right on the line to be a Hall of Famer. He's not in yet. I think that he has a case, and especially given all the winning that the Cowboys did while he was there. So hopefully he'll get in at some point.
Okay. So who are your defensive backs?
Woodson, Harris, Sanders, Renfro.
Okay. 4 for 4.
So 4 for 4. Right. Shout out to Everson Walls and Charlie Waters as well as honorable mentions. One as a corner, one as a safety.
So many choices. I mean, I think there's clear number ones, I think, at most positions, but I think after that, it's like, the defensive line, you could have made a case for DeMarcus Lawrence. He said Too Tall Jones, maybe to try to fit him in there. You know, if you change your alignment a little bit, but I think the number ones are pretty clear. And then same for head coach Tom Landry, slam dunk pick. You know what? I was shocked to see that Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy have better win percentages than Jimmy Johnson as a Cowboys head coach. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? It speaks to the standard that has been set, right? Because obviously it was a bad deal. Jerry buys the team. He runs Landry out of town. Jimmy has all that success. Then he runs Jimmy out of town. Yeah. But Landry built a program. You know, he was their first coach. He was the coach through all of the close calls that they had to all the winning they did in the 1970s. He's the guy.
Yeah, it wasn't even like a debate or anything. I was just like, okay, it's Tom Landry, but who's number 2? I mean, let me see. And then, of course, I look and I'm like, oh, wow. I guess Jimmy Johnson had that 2-15 season.
There it is.
That's 14 wins or whatever.
If you pull that out, I'm sure it's much. I mean, obviously it's much different because he was 1-15 that first season. I think they were probably under 500 the second season, and then they had the run, and then he was gone. Right, so he didn't get a chance to build a lot of winning percentage on 5 more years of that, which if he had stayed for what his term should have been. I
mean, he still probably doesn't dethrone Landry, but he's at least the strong case for number 2.
Exactly.
He's still number 2. It's not like any of the guys were up there, but this division, obviously with the history that they had, some of the teams were a little surprising in how thin they were at some positions, but
I guess that's just the way it goes. But like you said, the history that the Giants go back to the 20s, the Eagles go back to the 30s, so do the Redskins or the Commander franchise, and then the Cowboys, ironically, the youngest franchise of the 4 is easily the strongest.
Yeah, and I think they're the only ones that have had a couple different periods of sustained success, right? I mean, the Eagles obviously more recently, but for a long time, they were the only ones in the division without a Super Bowl, and they were derided for it. The Giants, maybe pre-Super Bowl era, they had those.
Pre-Super Bowl era,
and then, even after that, it was a one-off here and there. It wasn't like a sustained success. And of course, the Commanders, they had the 80s and not much else in the Super Bowl era. And then, of course, I mean, the Cowboys, they had the 60s and 70s with Landry, and then, the 80s and 90s with Jimmy Johnson and, all that. So this was a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what we do next.
Yes. We'll figure something fun out, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. And where can people see more of the Football Fanstorian content?
Well, Football Fanstorian, wherever you happen to be on social media, would be at TikTok or Instagram or at Facebook, all of it, YouTube Shorts, all of that. Football Fanstorian.
Love it. And you can find the 4040 Vision podcast on all the major platforms, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. And again, this is the Football Elevated podcast. We are focusing specifically on the NFL with definitely a historical lean to our conversations, which I love nerding out. This is the highlight of my week.
Yes.
All right, Mack, I appreciate you. Thank you, everyone who is watching. Please hit that follow, like, and subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, and we will catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.